So, this pile of wood, what do you think we can build with it? These are offcuts of Meranti that I bought. They're only about 50 centimetres long, 6 millimetres thick, and about 5 centimetres wide. They're in good condition, nicely planed and ready to use, but there's only so many things you can build with this size material. I make a huge mistake in the middle of this project, so make sure you watch out for that. In a previous video, I showed the process of building a thin wall box, and at this stage of the build, all I've got is the frame of those boxes, and I know they're going to be boxes, but I'm just deciding how I'm going to build the rest of the cabinet that these boxes are going to sit into. As with many of my projects, this is a prototype. I've never built anything like this before. I've not even seen anything like this before. But I'll work it out, and then if I enjoy the process, if I like the result, I may refine it and build another version. Because of the material I've got, I'm limited in the size. To build this project, I'm going to have to either laminate or joint or connect these pieces together to form panels, to form thick pieces of wood, and use those rather than cutting down a piece of wood from a larger block. And the section you can see me working on here is going to be the dividers between the boxes. And these are simple joints. They're not overlapping. They are just edge jointed together. This is going to be a very lightweight project, and it doesn't need to be super strong. I'm taking measurements from the boxes, and I'm going to transfer these to the dividing pieces. I want them to be fractionally bigger than the boxes so that the boxes will slide in and out easily, but not a huge amount bigger, because I don't want to leave substantial gaps around the edge of the box. When I started woodworking, some of the projects I built with the right idea, I like the design of them, but they weren't built very well. And one of the major improvements to the quality of my work came once I got to grips with the hand plane and the shooting board. I think this makes a huge difference to woodworkers, to be able to precisely match the pieces of wood to each other will help with alignment, will help with getting things square, and it's something even machine workers should have in their kit as a tool to use. And because everything I build at the moment seems to be a prototype, you'll often see me testing and retesting things. Does it fit? Is this box going to jam? Is it a good gap around the edges? At this stage, I've got a chance to adjust the pieces or make new pieces. Once it's glued up, I lose that chance. So it's better to get it right at this stage. So with this project, it was all developed as I went. I didn't have any drawings, I didn't have any designs. It was purely just looking at it as I went along. So what I'm doing at this stage is laying everything out as I'm hoping the end result will be, and it's probably the last chance I get to finalise the design before gluing together. So I take a few moments here just to check everything is working, check everything looks the right proportion. It's a good opportunity just to be certain that what I'm building is what I want it to be. The small anvil you see here is another project that I've put up on YouTube. So if you're interested, why don't you take a look in the playlist and you should be able to find this one. So now the whole design is finalised. I know what I'm doing, I know how to do it, so I'm marking out where the boxes need to go, where the dividers need to go, and how I'm thinking about how I'm going to glue this up, because I am just going to use butt joints. If I use dowels or if I use, dominoes, that sort of thing, I don't have any depth in this timber to be able to use fixings like that. So I think it's going to have to be just relying on glue. I could pin nail through the outside, but I don't really want them to be visible. So glue is strong, and it's going to be side grain glue up, so it should have plenty of strength for the amount of weight it's going to hold. So here I'm taking referential measurements. I'm using the dividers to create the marks for where they're going to be positioned, and then I'm using the box that's going to go next to that divider and marking off where the next of the dividers need to be, and then I'm continuing that process all the way down to the end. And as I mentioned earlier, I make a huge mistake in this project, and it's at this point that mistake happens. So the mistake I made was I miscalculated the position of one of the boxes, and I marked on the wrong side of the line for one of the divider pieces, which resulted in a gap of exactly one divider piece too wide for one of the holes. Now I've watched the clips back repeatedly 3 or 4 times to try and work out where I made the mistake, and even watching it back I'm struggled to find where the error came, but it definitely happened. But I can't point it out to you because it's not clear even in the video. Why don't you let me know in the comments what mistake you've made on a project and how you've gone about fixing it. because I'm going to be gluing these together and I'm not going to have any way of keeping the alignment of the divider pieces, I've decided to take an approach I've never tried before. I'm putting tape down on either side of the line of where the divider pieces are sitting, and I'm going to glue some blocks to those, and the blocks should hopefully act as a guide for the positioning of the divider pieces. Here I'm using a small jig I've made to help plane small stock. I'm creating two flat sides so that when it's positioned on the board, it can be lined up against the line accurately. These blocks don't need to be held very tightly, they're just there as a guide, so I'm just going to use super glue and activator to attach them to the tape. That way they should come off fairly easily at the end. With all the blocks in place, I can now test it, make sure it all fits correctly, and then glue up these pieces. Here I'm going to use some fencing panels just to act as coils on either side of the glue up. I'm not sure this is really necessary, but hopefully it will protect the surface from any damage. On this occasion, I've not left the glue to fully set. After about half an hour to an hour, I'm removing the clamps and I'm going to remove the tape and the blocks. The glue is set enough to hold it in place, but this way it's not set enough that it's locked the tape where it's covered it in place. Even so, some of these are a little more difficult to remove than others, and a quick tap with the chisel is enough to free them. So at this stage is the first time I've really seen the project starting to come together. I'm getting an idea of what it would look like. I'm going to fit the boxes in, and that'll give me a good representation of what the final product will be. And it's only at this point in the build that I spot my mistake earlier on. If you look here, you can see that this central box has a gap either side, and at this stage I have no idea how that happened. So it's time to problem solve. How do I fix this problem? what do I do? I could make a new box. I could make a box to fit neatly in the hole. That is an option. I could do some other things. I had intended to use oak handles on these boxes, some scrap oak, and it's now occurring to me maybe I could use the same material to narrow up this hole so it fits the box. And I'm just going to experiment with some scrap and see if that's a possibility. I decided using these scraps of oak is the way I'm going to proceed. So I'm going to glue some pieces together, and that way I can change the orientation so that the grain matches the grain of the timber that's already there. Don't really want to put pieces in against the grain direction that's already there, because it's likely to come loose if the wood swells at any point. I'm a big fan of the small clamps for panel glue-ups, especially these smaller panel glue-ups. They're not putting a great deal of pressure on. They put enough on for the glue to hold nicely, but they don't put so much on that it warps the timber you're putting in. They're affordable and very useful, and if you come across them, I definitely recommend picking some up. So as I'm gluing these pieces in, I'm starting to think that this will act like a nice feature. Because it's a central box, it's not going to look out of place. It's going to look like I'm highlighting the central box over the others. And the oak and the Meranti have some contrast at this stage. I'll decide at the end whether or not I would do that again in future, and I may make a separate video explaining my thought processes and my decisions. Seeing it all glued up, I decide I'm not happy with the shape. It's very rectilinear, and I round off the corners on the bandsaw, and I haven't got a video clip of that, but here I'm just sanding those corners. This timber's a little bit splintery, so there are places where there's a few gaps. I'm just going to use the glue and sawdust technique to fill those, because they're fairly small and they should easily be disguised. As I mentioned earlier, I decided to use oak for the handles, and I'm keeping these fairly simple. They're just going to be blocks of wood with a slight taper to them. So I'm using this vise to hold the blocks, allowing me to plane it. I've cut the corners on the bandsaw just to give a slightly nicer shape to the handles. I'll then glue these to the box. I place the handles centrally on the boxes and just have a look at it. I'm not overly happy with the appearance. It's fine, but there's nothing interesting about it. So I'm going to tweak it, I think, and just try experimenting with different positions, and you'll see the end result in the final image. After final sanding, I put on a hard wax oil on the boxes and the cabinet, and I attach these clips you can see here to hold it onto the wall. These will be hidden once it's attached to the wall. Overall, I'm really pleased with the way this project turned out. It's exactly what I needed. It was a good use of the scrap material, and I'm quite happy with the way it looks. There are some design choices that I would change if I was remaking it, and I think I'll probably go through those in another video. I hope you've enjoyed this project. Please like and subscribe if you have, and I hope you come back to watch some future videos.